day started like any other, but for her, it felt heavier than usual. She had been waiting for this moment for months, and now it was finally here. The recital was in a small auditorium at the community center, a place she had visited many times, but never with the weight of expectation pressing on her shoulders. She had spent countless hours practicing, her fingers moving over the keys almost without thought, but tonight was different. Tonight, people were going to watch her, and every note mattered. She sat at the edge of the stage, looking down at the polished wood floor. The hum of voices from the audience floated up to her, a soft murmur that seemed distant and unreal. She could see her family sitting in the front row, their faces a mixture of pride and nervousness. She felt their eyes on her, and a small wave of anxiety washed over her. She tried to breathe slowly, telling herself that she was ready, but the tension in her stomach made it hard to think clearly. Her teacher had given her some last-minute advice just minutes before she stepped on stage. "Keep it simple," the teacher had said. "Play something easy. Don't worry about impressing anyone. Just play the piece like you always do at home." The words were meant to be comforting, but instead, they made her feel restricted. She wanted to do more, to show what she could really do, but she knew she had to follow the instructions. The idea of failing in front of everyone made her hands sweat. Backstage, she watched the other performers one by one take their turns. Some were younger, some older, but all seemed confident in a way she did not. Each performance added to her anxiety. She thought about the moments she had practiced in her room, imagining an audience that never existed, and now she was about to face the real thing. She pressed her hands together, trying to calm the shaking, and reminded herself that this was just another practice, just a moment in time. The lights on the stage seemed brighter than she expected. As her name was called, she felt a jolt of fear shoot through her. She walked slowly toward the piano, her shoes clicking softly against the wooden floor. The audience's murmur grew quieter as everyone turned to watch her approach. Every step felt heavier than the last, and when she finally reached the piano, it felt enormous, like a mountain she had to climb. She sat down and adjusted the bench, her hands hovering over the keys. The first note she played was soft, almost hesitant, as if testing the water. The sound echoed through the hall, and for a moment, she felt a strange mixture of relief and panic. The room was bigger than her bedroom, and the piano felt colder. But she closed her eyes for a second and remembered all the hours she had spent practicing. Each note, each chord had led her to this point. She reminded herself that she could do this. As she started playing the simple piece her teacher had recommended, she noticed the faces in the audience. Some were polite, others distracted, but all were watching her. She felt the pressure mounting. She had played this piece hundreds of times, yet tonight it felt unfamiliar. Her fingers fumbled slightly at first, and she had to pause for a brief moment to regain her composure. She took a deep breath, feeling her chest rise and fall, and tried again. The music began to flow more naturally as her nerves slowly eased. The first few measures were steady, careful, and precise. She followed the sheet music in front of her, playing each note as written. There was a sense of safety in following the rules, but a part of her yearned to break free. She wanted to add something more, to let the music carry her beyond the simple notes on the page. She could feel the tension in her body as she played, a mix of fear and excitement. Her heart beat faster, but she kept her hands moving, trusting her fingers to do what they had always done. She glanced up occasionally, seeing the audience leaning slightly forward in their seats. There were older people with serious expressions, children with curious eyes, and parents with proud smiles. Each face was a reminder of the moment's importance. She felt a connection with them, even though it was small and fragile. They were waiting for something, and she was the one who had the power to give it to them. Backstage, she had imagined this moment countless times. She had pictured herself playing flawlessly, receiving applause, and feeling a rush of pride. Reality was different. The room was quiet except for the sound of her piano, and the audience's reaction was still forming. She told herself that it didn't matter. What mattered was the music, the story she was telling through her fingers. As she continued, she found a rhythm, a flow that made the notes feel less mechanical and more alive. She could hear the melody in her mind, the way it should sound if she let herself fully feel it. The tension in her shoulders began to ease slightly, and her breathing became steadier. The piano no longer felt like a mountain but like a friend she had known all her life. She was still nervous, but there was a growing sense of calm amidst the anxiety. The audience seemed to notice the change too. There were small movements, heads tilting, eyes widening. The polite listening was turning into genuine attention. She didn't know it yet, but the first seeds of awe were being planted. She kept her eyes mostly on the keys, letting the music guide her rather than the fear. Time passed slowly. The piece was longer than she remembered in practice, or perhaps it just felt longer because of the intensity of the moment. She felt every note, every pause, every quiet moment. She realized that playing wasn't just about hitting the right keys. It was about conveying emotion, sharing a part of herself with the audience. This realization gave her a small spark of courage. She could do more than just play simple notes. She could make people feel something. By the time she reached the final measures of the piece, her confidence had grown. Her fingers moved with a little more freedom, a little more expression. She was still careful, still precise, but the music began to carry a personal touch. She felt a sense of accomplishment in simply making it through, in giving herself fully to the music despite the nerves. When she finally played the last note, she held it just a fraction longer than written, letting it resonate in the hall. The sound lingered, and for a moment, there was silence. Then, a polite clap came from somewhere in the audience, followed by another, until the hall filled with soft applause. She didn't look up immediately, savoring the final vibrations of the piano. She felt relief, a little pride, and a growing curiosity about what might come next. She stood up slowly, her hands brushing her skirt, and allowed herself a small smile. She had made it through the first part of her journey, and though it was only the beginning, she knew that this night would stay with her. She felt the weight of expectation ease just a little and a new sense of possibility open inside her. The simple piece had been a start, but she sensed that the real story was only beginning, that there was more music inside her waiting to be shared. She had barely left the stage when a wave of nerves hit her again. The applause from the audience still echoed in her ears, but she knew she was only halfway through the evening. Other performers were still waiting, and she had to return to her seat, trying to blend in while her heart still raced from the adrenaline of her first performance. She sat down, feeling her hands still tingling from the piano keys, and watched the others perform. Each piece was different, some full of energy, some slow and gentle, and she found herself studying the way the other musicians moved, how their expressions changed as they played. Backstage, she remembered the advice to keep it simple, but now it seemed to her that simple wasn't enough. She wanted to play, not just follow notes. She wanted to feel every chord, every key under her fingers, and she began to imagine how she might take the next piece and make it her own. The thought both excited and terrified her. What if she went beyond what was expected and made a mistake? The audience might not understand, and the teacher's words echoed again in her mind. But a small voice inside her encouraged her to take a risk, to trust the hours she had spent practicing and the passion she felt for music. As the next performer finished, she felt her turn drawing closer. She watched the young pianist on stage with focused eyes, noting the confidence and mistakes alike. She thought about how much she had practiced, alone in her room, imagining the audience clapping at the end. Now here it was, real and unpredictable. The hall seemed to feel larger now, the lights brighter, the eyes of strangers more intense. But she realized something important. The music belonged to her, even if the stage felt enormous. Her fingers had learned the language of the piano, and it was hers to speak. Finally, it was her turn again. The stage felt familiar this time, but the nerves returned with double force. She walked to the piano slowly, each step measured, trying to calm the flurry of thoughts in her head. She took a deep breath and sat down, letting her hands rest gently on the keys. The audience was quiet now, waiting, expecting something. She thought about what she could give them, not just notes on a page, but something that would make them feel the music the way she did. She started the second piece cautiously, just as she had been told, keeping the notes simple and precise. But as she played, she began to notice the spaces between the notes, the small moments where she could add her own expression. She experimented with the timing, letting some notes linger slightly longer, playing others more softly. She could feel the music coming alive under her hands, and a spark of confidence started to grow. She realized that the audience was listening more closely now, and she could see the interest in their faces. Her heart pounded, but it was different this time, a mix of excitement and courage. As the piece progressed, she allowed herself to go further. She let her fingers move faster, more freely, dancing over the keys. The simple piece began to transform into something richer, something more complex. She felt a rush of energy as she played, as if the music itself was lifting her. She had practiced improvising before, but never in front of an audience. Now, she was taking a risk, letting the music flow naturally, letting her emotions guide every movement. The audience noticed the change almost immediately. There were gasps of surprise, some whispered words, and then the quiet, focused attention that a truly powerful performance brings. She felt a thrill, a mixture of fear and joy, knowing that she was holding their attention completely. Every chord she struck, every variation she added, seemed to resonate not just in the hall but deep within her own heart. She played as though she were telling a story without words, a story only music could convey, and she felt the connection with the listeners growing stronger with every note. She could sense her own transformation too. The fear that had gripped her at the start of the evening was still there, but now it was accompanied by a fierce determination. She no longer cared about playing it safe. She wanted to express herself fully, to show that she was capable of more than anyone expected. Her body moved in harmony with the piano, her shoulders relaxed, her fingers dancing, and her mind focused entirely on the music. The notes were no longer just instructions to follow. They were a bridge between her emotions and the audience. By the middle of the piece, she was completely immersed. She had forgotten her fears, the stage, even the audience in a way, and was living entirely in the music. She could feel every vibration, every echo of the piano resonating in the room. It was as if the hall itself was breathing with her, carrying her sound to every corner. The simple melody she had started with had blossomed into something dramatic, intricate, and alive. She felt a thrill of exhilaration she had never known before, a mixture of power and freedom that made her feel unstoppable. The audience's reaction grew more evident. People were leaning forward in their seats, eyes wide, watching her hands fly across the keys. Some were smiling, some were whispering to each other, amazed at the transformation of the music. She didn't look up, but she could feel their energy, feeding her own, and it encouraged her to keep pushing the limits. She realized that this moment was not just about showing talent. It was about creating a shared experience, letting everyone in the room feel the story she was telling through the piano. Every note became an expression of her heart, every pause a breath in the story she was unfolding. She played with passion and courage, letting herself be vulnerable, knowing that the audience could sense her honesty. She was no longer just following instructions. She was leading, guiding them through a journey that started simply, but had grown into something magnificent. Her hands moved faster, her fingers more confident, and the music flowed effortlessly, almost as if it had a life of its own. As the piece neared its end, she began to slow slightly, bringing back the softer, gentler tones from the beginning. She wanted to leave the audience with a sense of wonder, a feeling that they had witnessed something special. She held the final note longer than written, letting it linger, filling the hall with a resonance that seemed to stretch time itself. And then, just like that, it was over. The silence after the last note was brief but profound. Then, slowly, applause began to rise, soft at first, then louder, growing into a wave of clapping and cheers. She lifted her head for the first time, and her eyes met the faces in the audience. She saw astonishment, admiration, and pure joy. People were smiling. Some were on the edge of their seats, completely captivated. The feeling in her chest was indescribable, a mix of relief, pride, and exhilaration. She had taken a simple piece and transformed it into something unforgettable. Backstage, she felt a rush of emotions she had never experienced before. Her teacher came over, eyes wide with surprise and pride, saying nothing at first but just looking at her with a smile that said more than words could. Her family embraced her, telling her how incredible she had been. She could barely speak, overwhelmed by the intensity of the moment. She realized that she had discovered something important. Not just talent, but the courage to express herself fully, to take a risk and share her true gift. As she sat down again, still trembling slightly, she knew that the evening had changed her. She felt stronger, braver, and more alive than ever before. The audience had seen her potential, but more importantly, she had seen it herself. She understood now that music was not just about playing notes correctly, but about telling a story, about connecting with others in a way that transcended words. And as the next performer prepared to step on stage, she felt ready for whatever came next, knowing that she had already given something extraordinary and that she could do it again as the evening moved on. She found herself filled with a strange mixture of excitement and anticipation. She had felt the rush of giving something more than expected, and now she wanted to explore that feeling further. The stage no longer seemed intimidating, but inviting, a place where she could speak through her fingers and let the piano tell her story. She waited patiently for her next turn, watching other performers with a keen eye, noting the way the music moved through their expressions and how the audience reacted. Each performance added to her understanding, giving her ideas and confidence for what she could do next. When it was time again, she walked to the piano with steady steps. Her mind was calm, but alert, focusing on the possibilities rather than the fear. She knew that this performance was different from the first. It was a chance to truly let herself go. She sat down, adjusting the bench, and let her hands hover over the keys. For a moment, she closed her eyes, breathing deeply, imagining the music flowing through her. The hall seemed to quiet itself, as if waiting for her to start. She began with the simple notes of the piece as she had before, but this time she felt a growing sense of freedom. Her fingers moved more confidently, gliding over the keys with ease. The music started to transform, filling the room with an energy that seemed to radiate from her. Each chord she struck carried emotion. Each pause felt intentional. She realized she could guide the audience through the story she wanted to tell, and that realization filled her with courage. Halfway through, she began to experiment more boldly. She added flourishes, unexpected turns, and subtle variations in rhythm that gave the music a new dimension. The piece that had started simply now became a vibrant expression of her inner world. She felt herself smiling slightly, enjoying the power of the moment. The audience's attention grew even more, and she could feel their energy pushing her forward, encouraging her to take risks and go beyond the notes on the page. Her emotions flowed freely through her fingers. Every note was alive. Every chord resonated with feeling. She had entered a state where she was no longer just playing music, but living it. She could feel the room responding, the soft shifting of feet, the leaning forward in seats, the glimmer of surprise and admiration in the audience's eyes. She had taken a simple piece and turned it into a story full of twists, highs, and gentle moments, and the connection she felt with the listeners was electric. She remembered all the late nights of practice, the small victories and frustrations that had shaped her skills. Every hour had led to this moment, and she was determined to make it count. She played with intensity, but also with care, making sure every note conveyed exactly what she felt. She noticed the subtle smiles, the wide eyes, and the occasional gasp from the audience, and it filled her with a mixture of pride and humility. She knew she was touching people, and that realization gave her a deep sense of fulfillment. As she continued, she allowed herself to explore the extremes of the music. Some passages were gentle and delicate, soft enough to make listeners lean in and feel the fragility. Others were strong and bold, with rapid sequences of notes that made her hands move almost faster than thought. She felt every emotion, joy, sorrow, excitement, longing, and channeled it into her playing. The piano became an extension of herself, a voice that spoke what words could not. The audience was completely captivated. Parents whispered in awe, children stared wide-eyed, and even seasoned musicians seemed taken aback by the depth of expression. She had started with something simple, but now it had evolved into a performance that no one would forget. She felt a thrill of exhilaration as the energy in the room built, a wave of collective appreciation that surged toward her with every note. She had become not just a performer, but a storyteller, and the story she told was uniquely hers. She noticed small details that made the moment even more special. The way the light hit the piano keys, the subtle echoes of sound bouncing off the walls, and the soft breathing of the audience all added to the magic of the performance. She played with intention, shaping each phrase, guiding the listeners through peaks and valleys of emotion. It felt like a conversation, a silent dialogue between her and everyone watching. She was aware of every eye, every gesture, but she wasn't nervous. Instead, she felt connected, empowered, and fully alive. By the time she reached the climax of the piece, she was playing with complete freedom. Her hands moved with precision and grace, creating a wall of sound that filled the hall. The rapid sequences of notes were executed with perfect timing, the softer passages with delicate control, and the audience was held in rapt attention. She could feel their amazement, their admiration, and it gave her confidence to push even further. She had transcended the simple piece she had been told to play and had created something extraordinary from it. The final moments approached, and she slowed the pace, bringing the music back to its gentle beginnings. She allowed the last notes to linger, letting them resonate fully in the hall. The silence that followed was powerful, a pause that allowed the audience to absorb what they had just experienced. Then, slowly, the applause began, growing louder and more enthusiastic with each clap. She lifted her head, finally seeing the faces of the audience fully. Their expressions were filled with awe, appreciation, and delight. Some were standing, others clapping with joyful intensity, and she felt a rush of emotion sweep over her. Backstage, she felt the adrenaline still coursing through her veins. Her teacher approached, eyes wide with surprise and pride, nodding silently in approval. Her family rushed to her, embracing her, telling her how incredible she had been. She could hardly speak, overwhelmed by the intensity of the moment. She realized that she had done more than just play notes correctly. She had shared a piece of herself, created a memory for everyone watching, and discovered a new depth to her own abilities. Backstage, she felt the adrenaline still coursing through her veins. Her teacher approached, eyes wide with surprise and pride, nodding silently in approval. Her family rushed to her, embracing her, telling her how incredible she had been. She could hardly speak, overwhelmed by the intensity of the moment. She realized that she had done more than just play notes correctly. She had shared a piece of herself, created a memory for everyone watching, and discovered a new depth to her own abilities. Sitting down again, she felt a profound sense of accomplishment. She had transformed fear into courage, simplicity into brilliance, and hesitation into expression. She knew this was just one evening, but it had changed her forever. She had discovered the power of trusting herself, of letting her emotions guide her fingers, and of daring to go beyond expectations. The audience had been witness to her growth, and she had been witness to her own strength. As the evening continued, she reflected on the journey she had taken in those few short minutes on stage. She realized that music was more than practice and precision. It was emotion, connection, and the courage to be vulnerable. She understood now that the piano was not just an instrument, but a companion, a storyteller, and a mirror of her own heart. And as she watched the other performers, she felt a quiet excitement for the future, knowing that this night had shown her what she was truly capable of. The applause from her previous performance still echoed in her mind as she took her seat among the other performers. She felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration, her hands still tingling from the piano keys and her heart still racing from the adrenaline. The audience had been captivated, and she had felt their energy feeding her own, making her feel alive in a way she had never experienced before. But she knew there was more to come, and she wanted to savor every moment. As she watched the remaining performers, She began to notice details she hadn't before. The subtle expressions on their faces, the way they moved with the music, and the way the audience responded to each note. Each performance was unique, and she felt a sense of camaraderie with those who were sharing the stage with her. They were all giving their best, and she understood that they were all part of the same journey, even if their paths were different. She took mental notes, learning from their strengths and weaknesses, thinking about how she could grow even more. Her mind kept returning to her own performance, to the moment when she had taken a simple piece and transformed it into something extraordinary. She could still feel the vibrations of the final notes, the way they had lingered in the air, and the silence that had followed before the applause erupted. It had been a moment of pure connection, a fleeting yet powerful experience that she knew she would remember for the rest of her life. She felt proud, but also humble, understanding that her gift was something to be shared, not just displayed. As the evening progressed, she found herself thinking about the audience. She could see their faces in her mind, the wide eyes, the whispered amazement, the clapping that grew louder with each note. She realized that her performance had touched them in ways she hadn't anticipated. Music had the power to move people, to make them feel emotions they might not even understand fully, and she had experienced that firsthand. The thought made her heart swell with gratitude and a renewed sense of purpose. When it was her turn again, she felt a calm determination. She walked to the piano with steady steps, her mind focused on the music rather than the audience. She sat down, adjusting the bench, and let her hands hover over the keys. For a moment, she closed her eyes and breathed deeply, centering herself. The hall seemed to hold its breath with her, waiting for the next wave of sound to fill the space. She knew that this performance was an opportunity to build on what she had already achieved, to push herself further and explore the depths of her talent. She began to play, starting with a few simple notes to establish the melody. Her fingers moved smoothly, guided by muscle memory and intuition. As the piece progressed, she allowed herself to add subtle variations, delicate flourishes that made the music her own. She could feel the audience leaning in, sensing the change, and it encouraged her to continue exploring. Every note was deliberate, every pause intentional, and she felt a deep connection with the sound she was creating. The piece began to evolve, growing in complexity and emotion. She felt the music taking control, guiding her fingers in ways she hadn't planned. She let herself be carried by the melody, allowing her emotions to shape the performance. The audience responded immediately, their attention fully captured by the transformation unfolding on the stage. She could see their eyes widening in surprise, their hands clapping softly in appreciation, and she felt a thrill of exhilaration knowing that she was holding their focus completely. As she played, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The countless hours of practice, the moments of frustration and doubt, the small victories that had built her confidence. Every experience had prepared her for this moment. She understood now that talent alone was not enough. It was dedication, passion, and courage that made a performance truly memorable. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for all the people who had supported her, from her teachers to her family, and even the strangers in the audience who were witnessing her growth. The middle of the piece became a turning point. She allowed herself to play with more freedom, exploring dynamics and tempo changes that brought the music to life in unexpected ways. Her hands moved faster, her fingers dancing across the keys, and the hall seemed to vibrate with energy. She could feel the audience reacting, leaning forward in their seats, holding their breath during the quiet passages, and erupting in applause during the crescendos. She had become a storyteller, using the piano as her voice to convey emotions that words could never capture. Every note was a reflection of her inner world, a window into her thoughts and feelings. She played with passion and precision, balancing technical skill with emotional depth. The audience was fully engaged, completely absorbed in the music. She could see the impact of her performance on their faces, the awe, the surprise, the joy, and it filled her with a sense of accomplishment that was almost overwhelming. She realized that this was more than just a recital. It was a shared experience, a moment of connection between her and everyone in the room. As the piece approached its climax, She poured every ounce of energy into the performance. Her hands moved with lightning speed, yet each note was clear and intentional. The music swelled, filling the hall with a richness and intensity that seemed to carry beyond the walls. She felt a surge of emotion, a mixture of pride, exhilaration, and gratitude. She had taken a simple piece and transformed it into something extraordinary, and the audience was responding with equal intensity. The final notes approached, and she began to slow, returning to the gentler tones that had opened the piece. She held the last note, letting it resonate fully in the hall, and for a moment, there was silence. Then the applause began, soft at first, then building into a wave of clapping and cheering. She lifted her head and saw the audience on their feet, some wiping tears from their eyes, others smiling with admiration. The feeling of connection and validation was overwhelming, and she allowed herself to savor it fully. Backstage, her teacher greeted her with a mixture of pride and astonishment. Her family rushed to embrace her, their eyes shining with admiration and love. She could hardly speak, overwhelmed by the intensity of the moment. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that she had not only played music but shared a piece of herself. The experience had been transformative, showing her the power of courage, expression, and connection. As she sat quietly afterward, reflecting on the evening, she realized that this was only the beginning. She had discovered a new depth to her abilities, a newfound confidence in her own voice, and the understanding that music could move people in ways she had never imagined. She felt inspired to continue exploring her talent, to take risks, and to push herself beyond the simple pieces she had once relied on. The audience's reaction had shown her the impact of sharing her gift, and she knew that she wanted to continue creating moments like this. The rest of the evening passed in a blur, each performance adding to the tapestry of the night. She watched with appreciation, learning from each musician, and feeling a sense of connection with everyone on stage. She understood that music was not just about skill, but about courage, emotion, and the willingness to share a part of oneself. And as the final notes of the last performance faded into the night, she felt a quiet sense of triumph. She had taken a simple beginning and turned it into something unforgettable, leaving the audience in awe and discovering the true power of her own talent. As the recital drew to a close, she felt a mixture of exhaustion, relief, and exhilaration. The applause that had filled the hall moments ago still echoed in her mind, and she could feel the lingering energy from the audience. Each performance that night had been unique, but her own experiences had left her transformed. She realized that she had not only played music but had also told stories, shared emotions, and connected with people in a way that transcended words. Backstage, the performers gathered quietly, exchanging smiles, congratulations, and whispered reflections on the evening. She felt a sense of camaraderie with them, a shared understanding of the nerves, excitement, and passion that each had poured into their performance. She thought about the journey she had taken from the first simple notes she had been told to play, to the expressive, powerful music that had left the audience in awe. The contrast was remarkable, and she felt proud of herself for taking the risk to let her emotions guide her fingers. Her teacher approached, eyes filled with pride and admiration. Without saying much, there was a sense of acknowledgement and respect. The simple instruction to play something basic had been a starting point, but she had gone beyond it, revealing her true talent and emotional depth. Her family, standing nearby, shared in her triumph, their smiles wide and eyes shining. They had witnessed not just a performance, but a transformation, and they understood the significance of the moment for her. She reflected on the courage it had taken to step beyond the simple notes, to let her instincts and feelings shape the music. At first, fear had held her back, making her doubt herself. But with each key she pressed, each chord she struck, she found confidence and freedom. She had learned that following instructions could be safe, but embracing her own voice created something extraordinary. That lesson would stay with her forever, shaping how she approached not just music, but life itself. After the recital, as the audience began to leave, she lingered for a moment, listening to the quiet murmurs of people sharing their reactions. Some were amazed by the sudden display of talent, Others had been moved to tears, and a few had whispered about the sheer courage it took to transform a simple piece into a performance full of emotion. She felt a warm glow knowing that her music had touched people in such a meaningful way. It was more than applause. It was connection, understanding, and shared experience. She thought about the hours of practice, the quiet moments alone in her room, the repetitions that had seemed endless. Each one had built the foundation for tonight, giving her the skill and confidence to take risks and express herself. She realized that every effort, every mistake, and every small success had contributed to this moment. It was a reminder that dedication and perseverance, combined with courage and creativity, could lead to remarkable outcomes. In the days that followed, she began to notice the impact of her performance extending beyond that evening. People complimented her, offered opportunities to perform elsewhere, and spoke of the way her music had left them feeling inspired. She received messages of admiration and encouragement, some from strangers who had been in the audience and others from people who had heard about the recital. She felt a sense of responsibility, knowing that her talent could inspire others, and she embraced it with humility and determination. She also reflected on the personal growth she had experienced. The recital had taught her to trust herself, to believe in her instincts, and to embrace the possibility of taking risks. She had discovered that fear and excitement could coexist, and that the key to overcoming nerves was to focus on the story she wanted to tell through her music. The experience had given her a new perspective on life, showing her that stepping beyond expectations could lead to profound and unexpected results. Her practice routine changed after that night. She continued to hone her skills, but with a new emphasis on creativity and expression. She experimented with improvisation, explored different styles, and allowed herself to play without fear of making mistakes. Each session became an opportunity to discover more about herself and her music. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It was a partner in exploration, a mirror of her emotions, and a channel for connection with others. She also began to see the broader impact of her experience. Watching her, other young musicians felt encouraged to explore their own creativity, to take risks, and to find their voices. Teachers and mentors recognized the importance of nurturing individuality, and she became an example of how talent, combined with courage and self-expression, could create unforgettable experiences. Her story began to inspire not just those in her immediate circle, but a wider community who valued the courage to go beyond the ordinary. In quiet moments, she would replay the evening in her mind, recalling the faces in the audience, the energy in the hall, and the feeling of being completely immersed in the music. She remembered the first simple notes she had been told to play, and how they had evolved into a powerful, expressive performance. She cherished the memory, knowing that it was a turning point in her journey, a moment when she truly discovered the depth of her own abilities. Looking back, she understood that the recital had been more than just a performance. It had been a lesson in courage, self-expression, and the power of connecting with others. It had shown her that even simple beginnings could lead to extraordinary outcomes if one had the confidence to follow their instincts and the courage to share their true self. The applause, the admiration, and the awe of the audience were all acknowledgments of the authenticity she had brought to the music. As time went on, she continued to perform, each recital and concert building on the lessons of that night. She remembered the fear, the nervousness, and the joy, and she carried those feelings with her as she approached each new challenge. She found that the more she trusted herself and her abilities, the more meaningful and impactful her performances became. The experience had transformed her not just as a musician, but as a person, giving her confidence, resilience, and a deep appreciation for the power of expression. In the end, she realized that the true reward was not the applause or recognition, but the discovery of her own voice. She had learned that music could be a reflection of her heart, a way to connect with others, and a source of endless exploration. She had taken a simple beginning and turned it into something extraordinary, and in doing so, she had discovered the courage to embrace her talent fully and share it with the world. That night remained a defining moment, a reminder of what could be achieved when talent, dedication, and bravery came together to create something unforgettable.